So we said action arenas and action situations may involve the same participants but have different positions. So let's look at a bit more detail in terms of the participants and positions in action situations. The number of participants and positions in an action situation may vary, but there must be at least 2 participants in an action situation. This is the minimum. If you're out there doing something crazy on your own, that is not necessarily an action situation by this analysis method. Participants need to be able to make choices about the actions they take. The collection of available actions represents the spectrum of possibilities by which participants can produce particular outcomes in that situation. Information about the situation may vary, but all participants must have access to some common information about the situation. Otherwise, we cannot say that participants are in the same situation. So even though you are coming from different positions into the action situation, in this action arena you have some common information available to both of you. The costs and benefits assigned to actions and outcomes create incentives for the different possible actions. How these affect the choice of participants depends on the preferences, resources and skills participants have. So it's like going into the squash court with your boss. Obviously it depends on what kind of shots you prefer, whether you are tall or short, or your racket is very high fiber, high fiber. It's very fancy one, and either your skills are up to snuff compared to the boss, and so on. And who has power? So obviously in the squash court there is no power to either one. The better player may have some better expected outcome repeatedly happening. Not all participants may have the same level of control, allowing some to have substantial power over the others and the relative benefits they can achieve. So this is a situation here, a poor man polishing the shoes of a wealthy man. So the shoe boy doesn't have the money to buy shoes, and even if he buys shoes, he doesn't have the money to go and get his shoes polished by another shoe boy, whereas this person in this situation has the wherewithal, the wealth to buy the shoes and to go get his shoes polished by this boy and pay the boy. So this situation is asymmetric in that sense, but you can see that there may be another situation where these two same players may be involved with different relative positions in that action arena and action situation. Okay, let's read a bit more about. There is inequality in wealth between countries and within countries. So in the shoeshine boy's case, obviously there is a difference in wealth, and this person has certain wealth and position over this shoeshine boy. There are differences in information access and access to decision makers between the haves and have-nots. Poor people have fewer possible actions available to them than do rich people. With wealth comes access, right? Information is poverty. Everybody thinks money defines poverty, but often lack of information is serious poverty as well. The rich man in figure 3.3 can polish his own shoes but can also pay someone else to do it. The poor man does not have the shoes that need to be polished, let alone resources to pay somebody else to polish his shoes. This example shows that not every person can occupy each possible position in an action situation. Both men can occupy the positions of citizen or legal adult, but only the wealthy man can be both polisher and the polishee. The fact that poor men cannot be the polishee is due to one of the two factors. Formal rules or norms about social roles and occupations allowed for different social roles, such as the caste system in India. Okay, because the poor man lacks the resources or capacity to be the polishee. In the first case, it is the action situation that limits the actions of the poor man. In the second case, it is an outcome of the action arena that limits his choices. So if you are in a social class that doesn't allow you to occupy another position, then that is an outcome of the action arena itself and not the action situation. Whether an individual can occupy a certain position may be affected by wealth, education, elections, inheritance, passing a test, age, gender, and many other criteria. Elections are a good example because people beg for your votes, spend a lot of money to get your attention, to make you vote for them, but once they get elected, they are under protection, security. If you look at the security of somebody like the president of a country, you cannot get anywhere near them even though you voted them to put them in power, right? So that's a very strange arrangement of Action Arena and Action Situations, but this is needed for running governments, right? As we'll see later as we see in later chapters, the rules that affect positions play an important role in how communities can sustain their commons. So this always comes back to sustaining the commons and avoiding the tragedies of the commons. So we have to head towards that. The basic working parts of Action Situations. Let's now discuss the elements of an action situation so we can begin to understand what is common to all of the interactive situations we may observe or experience in our lives. Participants, for example, in an action situations, they are assigned to a position and capable of making a choice between different possible actions. The participants in action situations can be individuals, but also corporate actors such as nations, states in a federal system, private corporations, non-governmental organizations, and so forth. Whenever participants are organizations, one treats them in the situation as if they were a single individual, but one that is linked to a series of additional situations within their own organization. So what position they come up with to a action situation is something that happens separately, so that they are representing themselves as one unit in that particular action situation, and their position depends on that organization they made beforehand. When one is interested in the outcome of an action situation for the organization, we may ignore the linked situation and just focus on the strategy of the organization as an individual actor. So however they organized, whatever their internal arrangements are, whatever their internal positions are as to the members of the organization, the leader of the organization, sometimes there are treasurers and strategists and so on and so forth. Different expertise exist in the organization to achieve a position, and a leader is chosen to represent the organization in the action situation, but that's all irrelevant in the action situation. Only the individual representation is important. However, if we notice that there are problems with the functioning of an organization within an action situation, we may look at the functioning of the organization itself and study the action arena of that organization. It's like a team winning or losing a game, and the coach and the team owners and the equipment, everything has to be separately considered to understand the losses. As such, action arenas can be composed of action arenas of lower level actors, right? For example, the United Nations consists of many countries. To understand the functioning of the action arena of the United Nations, we may look at the ambassadors as participants, or we may look into the action arenas of a country in which the ambassador also participates to understand the decisions made by that ambassador. So ambassador is there advocating a position or voting in a certain way based on what has happened in the lower level levels of the organization that is being represented at the UN. Several attributes of participants are relevant when representing and analyzing specific situations. These include number of participants, their status as individuals or a team or composite actor, and various individual attributes such as age, education, gender, and experience. Here is an example. North Korea is an example of a closed society. Citizens have no control over the decisions they can make, have no control over the information they receive, and have no ability to change regulations. This, of course, is what we are assuming. We don't always know what is the internal functioning of the system, but from the outside and from what we can understand from the outside, we know that Kim Jong-un is in charge and he's making all the rules, and he's determining what positions are occupied by different participants in each action arena, in each action situation. So the citizens apparently don't have any control on the decisions they make, and they certainly do not vote and change regulations and so on. The number of participants, maybe I should find an appropriate pace to break. Focus of this book is the action situations associated with the commons, so we keep coming back to that. Therefore, action situations that are of interest to us require at least 2 participants, where the actions of each affect the outcomes for both. So we'll see this more clearly in the next chapter when we begin to see social dilemmas which affect the actions, and sometimes both have the same information, sometimes they don't. This could be 2 farmers sharing a water source, for example. The specific number of participants is often specified in detail by formal regulations, such as for legislation, number of seats in the Senate or Congress, juries, number of jury members that sit to make a judgment, and most sports, number of members on a team. Some descriptions of a situation, however, specify the number of participants in a looser fashion, such as a small or large group, or face-to-face relationships versus impersonal relationships. So the action situation may be relations, dinner together versus meeting, lunch, business lunch, and so on. Since many other components of an action situation are affected by the number of participants, this is a particularly important attribute in the analysis of any action situation. Figure 3.5 shows some examples from sports illustrating the number of participants in action situations. So let's look at this and then go back. Different numbers of players. So sumo wrestling has 2 with a referee of some sort. Soccer has 3, 6, 10, 11, I suppose, and Tour de France has a large number of participants, but there are teams and there are rules, and teams organize themselves to make one leader, co-leader. There are very complicated rules that I don't even understand, but maybe you do. And of course you have marathon, where more than 10,000 runners run. There are rules to be followed, there are paths to be followed, and then one person wins. Maybe there are often a male winner and a female winner to account for the differences in the physiological abilities and so on. Let's not get into that and make some controversial statement. Nonetheless, there is always a female winner and a male winner, right? So you get the sense that a number of participants is going to depend on the action arena and the action situation, and the outcomes also depend on that, and the organization's rules and norms are based on the number of participants when they are specifically defined. But there are many action situations where the numbers may be more loosely defined, as we said, as a small group or a large group, and so on. Okay, so let's leave this here and come back and look a little bit more about individual or team status of participants and what the expected outcomes tend to be, and so on. Okay.